Hi everybody, thank you for joining me. I'm just going to wait for a few minutes. Good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining. Nice to see you all join. I'll just give it a few seconds before I start. Thank you for joining. Let me start by introducing myself and who I am and why we're here. So my name is Jas Bamra, for those of you who do not know me. I am a Rapid Transformational Therapy practitioner. That's Rapid Transformational Therapy, RTT. And I help people who are going through grief and the effects and the things that happen around grief. So I help people move through their grief, anxiety, depression, and to come the other side so that they can move forward and live a meaningful life. And I do that as a means through this powerful therapy that is called Rapid Transformational Therapy. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not know what it is. RTT is basically a unique hybrid therapy that combines the positive aspects of things like NLP, psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, and just works with the most positive aspects of those. And it also has its own unique techniques that we use and we apply. So RTT is something that I was drawn to when I studied and did the course with Mind Valley called Uncompromised Life. It is a course that really opened my eyes into the power of hypnotherapy initially. And I found that I was able to peel off a lot of layers that were hidden in my subconscious and how I presented myself to the world in a very unique way. And when I found that I could actually practice this and I could actually take part, and not only take part, but actually serve people, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So in terms of what it allows you to do, RTT is something that allows you to basically peel away and get to the subconscious beliefs that are rooted in us, that are so profoundly ingrained in us that we don't realize that they are leading us in our life and allowing us to kind of view each event of our life in a way that keeps us sort of bound to those old beliefs. So for example, if you have a belief somewhere that things are never available to you, whether you're in a new job or you're seeking a promotion or if you're in a relationship, that belief will somehow play out. So I worked in RTT with many clients, and I continue to do so. When I first started studying RTT, we actually practice on each other, and we also do practice with clients after we reach a certain level of studying. And so Dr. Manjit Sahota, the person who I hope will join us, is somebody who was my very first client. And she actually came into my life when she herself was going through a lot of things, and she's going to speak to you about how things panned out for her and what actually happened to her. So I'm actually waiting for her to join, and I've not seen her come on. Thank you everybody who's come on. I'm just waving at you. Manjit, if you can see me, please request to join me so that I can add you to the call. Please request to join. You're here. So all right, hopefully she'll be joining soon. Give me a second, guys. This is my very first collaboration live that I'm doing. So I am trying to get her to join me. Apologies for the delay. I can see her name and I can see that she has sent a request. Manjit, are you not getting some sort of join thing? Because I can see you're here and you're typing, and I can see you've sent a request. Okay, I've sent you an invite, and just that's it. Okay,
So it's
starting to get a bit worried. Thank you for joining me.
no,
So
thank
good
you
to
for
have
having
you.
me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Can you hear and see me okay?
Yeah, I can see you. I think as the internet settles, it will become a lot more clear. Thank you so much for joining me, Manjit. First of all, I just want to say, in my journey of RTT and my therapy, I truly feel blessed and so grateful. Today I've come full circle with you because you were the very first client that I actually practiced a full session with. And from the word go, we've had such profound success and good results with you. And for me, as a student at the time, it really, really made me be awestruck by the power of this therapy. And I'm so grateful that you're actually able to come up here and speak to everybody here, because I know it's not easy sharing your life story, your personal events and things that have happened in front of so many people. So I really, truly appreciate you. So as we get started, do you just want to introduce yourself briefly to everybody?
Sure. My name's Manjit Sahota. I'm 47 years old, born and bred in the UK. I'm married with a 7-year-old son, and I work for the World Trade Organization in London. I'm their Chief Technology Officer now.
Brilliant. So basically, let's get started on why we're here today. We're discussing what happened with you and how RTT helped you and why you're here today. So tell me briefly about when you first had that session with me, when I first told you about RTT and what was going on in your life. Give us a little bit of an idea on your backstory so that people get a context of it.
Sure. I would say I'm quite well educated. Born and bred here in the UK, but I come from a very conservative Sikh Indian background, which I'm very proud of. And this is my third marriage now. I was married very young, at the age of 19. It was an arranged marriage, but not an enforced marriage. And it turned out to be a very abusive, physically and emotionally. And it took me 10 years to be able to pluck up the courage, because at that time, over 20 years ago, divorce was just a very dirty word in our culture. Yeah. And I think certainly within my community, I was very much one of the very first people to get divorced. So having the courage to take that step was a big one, not only for me, but also for my parents as well, because they faced a lot of pressure and a lot of discrimination from their peers and society as well. So it was very, very difficult to do. I love my parents so much. They have done everything for me in my life. And I've always had this thing about pleasing them and making them happy and making them proud. And I think I have done. So coupled with that, belief, and that with having a failing marriage was very difficult to fight with, regardless of the the physical and emotional abuse that I was facing day in, day out. But I managed to sort of put that to one side and lock myself away and just focus on my studies. That was my escapism. So during that period, I managed to turn something that was really horrible into something positive, because I was still moving forward in my little hideaway and focusing on my studies. Anyway, after having successfully escaping from that relationship, my first relationship, I then found true love with my second husband.
Take your time.
And he played a big part in helping me recover and giving me the confidence and strength to be the best person that I could be, being a best friend on top of everything else. And we had 9 absolutely amazing, blissful years together. Absolutely amazing. And then one day, we were in a road traffic accident, and he passed away from his injuries. He was in a coma for 2 weeks, even though the doctors at the time said that he was had been brain dead literally minutes after the accident. But I couldn't let go. I couldn't tell them to switch the life support machine off. It was just a difficult thing to do. And it got to a point where his body started to decay in ICU when I had to, and I didn't know this at the time, but as next of kin, you have to physically tell the medical staff to switch the life support machine off. And that's got to be one of the most difficult things I've had to do in my life. Following that, you know, I played the role of what society wanted. You know, a certain period you have to move on with your life. You know, go back to work, and you know, you should be getting better now. You know, it's 2 years on, it's 3 years on, but it followed a 9-year period of complete mourning inside, but on the outside having to put this pretense of what not just culturally, but how the world sees grief and what you're expected to now feel, you know, as if grief has a timeline. You know, okay, so you have 6 months of grief, a year, you should be moving on, 2 years, you should be happy and smiling. Doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way.
So regardless of how you're feeling inside, you start acting the way people expect you to act, you know, and get on with things. I focused on trying to get better. You know, I went for years of really secluded in my own home, but, you know, stopped my career, stopped my work, stayed in bed, survived on crisps and apples because I just wasn't coping. And then there was the cultural pressure of getting married again, and I could feel the pressure being put on my family to say, oh, well, you know, she's a widow now and you need to marry her off, and the arrangement marriages started coming through. And I thought, I'm not going to go through that again, you know. And the only way that I could see getting independence was to be married again. So one of my late husband's friends agreed to be a donor for IVF, because one of my ambitions from a very young age, and I've still got my book from primary school, was the 2 things that I wanted to achieve in life was to work in space and to be a mummy. And it was simple as that. So for 25 years, I wanted to be a mummy. So I thought, you know what, I need to have something to get out of bed for, to have something to live for. So I asked my friend to say, look, let's have a Indian ceremony, right? Nobody needed know that we're not in a marriage, but obviously it will give me this cover of not being a widow and going through IVF and all the stuff and implications that brings being an Indian woman. But it will give me that safety net to be able to go through the IVF treatment without the cultural pressures and my parents would be left alone as well, because they'd have that respectability that their daughter's now married and now she's going to go and have a baby. So I played the part, but inside I was still grieving. And it wasn't till the point that I got pregnant with my son that I realized that I had something to live for. It was like life literally was growing inside me, but I was growing, I was living again.
Yeah.
And I was able to come off all my medication. I was literally surviving on crisp apples and pills, morning, noon and night, pills to sleep, pills to wake me up, totally dependent on them completely. And my mum came and lived with me and helped me sort of come off all my medications very rapidly, because obviously I was carrying a baby now. I didn't want to pose a risk to something that I'd worked so hard to get and achieve after all these years. And I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, and I'm now happily married to my husband and being able to live and enjoy life again.
Yeah.
But underpinning that, there was still something stopping me. And, I was constantly being told, and I believed it to a large extent, I believed it. Oh, but you're married again now. You should be happy.
Yeah.
You've got a son now. You've wanted a baby for so many years. Why aren't you happy? Snap out of it. Or, do this, try this medication, herbal medication, do exercise. And every time you tried these initiatives and failed, because it wasn't fixing the grief, you felt even more of a failure, and I became more involved in myself.
So just to put it in context, even though you had found a partner, you were married, you had the baby, your son, you still were grieving inside, isn't it? And you still felt like you had not made peace, or there was something that was still holding you back. And that was the point at which I think we worked together, because on the outset, things looked like she's settled, everything's going well. Your husband is an amazing man. You had a beautiful boy. It looked really good. But inside, there were certain things that were still not quite right from that point of view. So tell me, physically, mentally, emotionally, at that point, what was going on? So in terms of your physical health, how were you? Because you'd been through so much already.
Yeah.
But where were you at physically, mentally, emotionally when we met and I said, look, I'm doing this therapy, I can help you. Shall we do this? And you said, yeah. So where were you at that physically, mentally, emotionally? Just to give people an idea of, because like you said, people have this thing in them that grief is something that, you just get over.
No, of course.
And here is your example where you've actually remarried. You've had the baby, the son you always wanted, but still, it's still there. So tell people about that.
So I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor, and you follow logic, you follow a sense of logic, and the only solutions that were available for me from the medical profession was, oh, we'll give you some pills for your depression. I went through that road before. They don't work. They just suppress everything, but they don't fix anything. 9 years on, that was what was happening. And subsequently, my husband actually had a brain tumor. Luckily, it wasn't cancerous. But he ended up being in the same hospital as my late husband went to, in the same ward, under the same consultant. And here I was for 8 months driving backwards and forth, doing that same journey to that same place with a child in tow. And it just brought a flood of emotions back, to the point where I could no longer conceal the pretense of being over my grief. Yeah. Being happy, acting the way that I'm expected to act. I'm happy now, I'm married, I've got a son. Everything's fixed now, isn't it? So why are you still depressed? We don't understand. Why are you still depressed?
Yeah.
And it got to the point where you actually feel suicidal, because no one understands.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people are commenting and saying you're being very brave. They're really, really sending you lots of love, by the way. So it's not easy to do what you're doing. So a lot of people are appreciating what you are saying.
And
so in terms of Do you want to say something else? Go on.
Yeah. So in terms of my personal life and obviously my career, I'm a very private person.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal for me to be able to talk about this. But the reason I am talking about it is because I had this treatment. I worked with you even at times when I couldn't understand it myself. I followed the system and I came out the other end. So that's why it's
So,
important. If there's one person that's listening on here and it helps them, then it's worth going through this. Does that make sense? So that's what
yeah,
I'm here.
absolutely. So let's speak up about that. Let's speak about what the the therapy was like. I know it's been about 2 years nearly since you had it, so you may have forgotten the details because we
Yeah.
move through it. But in terms of the session, people have an idea around hypnotherapy or hypnosis that a, you lose control or it's not safe.
Yeah.
How did you feel during the session? What was the main thing that came up for you? And how did you feel about the recording? We'll talk about the recording a bit, but tell us about the session itself that we had, about everything that was going on with you.
Sure. So first of all, I mean, I've done hypnotherapy myself, and I know a lot of people out there who have been through difficult journeys do get some support in terms of self-help awareness. But one of the things is you can be a heart surgeon, but you can never operate on yourself. So it was accepting that I had all the tools within my remit, but why wasn't I able to help myself? So I had to seek help, and hence making contact with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you remember when I contacted you, I was in a very desperate state.
Yes.
And we had a 2-hour discussion, and
The
I tried
therapy
not to think
itself.
about things. Yeah,
Yeah.
tried not to think about things, just answer things as they were coming out.
Yeah. So that's the subconscious, right? So when you are in that state, you're relaxed and you're just speaking. So
Yeah,
when you said you try not to think about, that is what happens in hypnosis. So you're still having, it was very much like a dialogue, wasn't it?
it was
But
definitely.
it's where you're not thinking. So the conscious mind is sort of sent away and the subconscious is allowing to come up with whatever needs to come up. And
Yeah,
that is where the layers start peeling away, isn't it?
it is.
And at the end, towards the last kind of session, so we uncovered a couple of beliefs. Let's talk about that. So what was the main thing in the end? You mentioned it when you were discussing that about not feeling enough or trying to please people. What was the main thing that came up for you?
I think it was my belief system in wanting my parents to be proud of me.
Yeah.
And they were very much set in their ways in terms of what people felt and thought. So that overrode anything that I thought that was right or wrong.
Yeah. So all this time you were so like seeking their approval and wanting to please them. But at the same time, all this stuff was going on, but you were truly not meeting your inner needs. And you
No.
hadn't let go of all the grief and the pent up stuff and acknowledged how far you had actually come.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we did in the session. So I remember it was really, really profound for me. It was really profound for you. But then towards the end of each session, we make a bespoke recording while we're in session. And that's a recording that is meant to rewire and embed those better beliefs, the new beliefs in your mind. And so I gave you your recording. And I'm so proud of you because normally we ask people to listen to it for 3 to 4 weeks daily. But you were adamant and you were really committed to getting better and having a better life. So you listened to it for 2 or 3 months. Tell me a bit about the recording and what that did, because I was really happy with you for that.
So obviously having had that session, it brought out so many things that I didn't even think about. I didn't think were
Yeah,
connected to how I was feeling in any way, shape or form. But clearly they underpinned everything,
yeah,
everything that I was feeling, everything I was thinking. And I think for the first instance, I just followed your instructions, right? I used to put it on my headphones. I used to put the recording on repeat. And because I was still in such a vulnerable place, I used to fall asleep listening to it. And then slowly, as the days and weeks went on, I started listening more and more, and it started sinking in when I was awake as well as when I'm sleeping as well. And again, I didn't make the connection, but I noticed things that I was doing different when I was conscious. Habits were changing that I thought, hang on, I would never have done that before. I would never have stood up to that before. And I think as I saw those changes, it just built on what you were telling me and what you'd said. And that that encouraged me even more, because I could see the difference that it was making in not only my life, but the people around me, my loved ones around me.
I remember you saying that to me.
And the biggest,
someone here has just asked a question, Manjit, and I think let me just answer that before we move on. So they're saying, do you have to prepare for the first session or come without? No, I do chat with you. So I had a chat with Manjit. We talked about what was going on. There is some information I get now through a form, and we decided on what she needed to work on, what was the one thing she needed to really work on, and we go from there. And I do have a bit of prep. So we do have an initial discovery call, and then we decide on what you want to work on, and then there's some information you feed back to me via a form. So that was just a question that came up. Sorry, Manjit, go on. You were saying, so yeah, you said to me that people have started noticing that things are changing around me, and it's the small things that are shifting, right? So in terms of, how did you find, like, as I was working with you, so I did weekly check-ins with you, right? Just to see how you were. How did you find that support from my end in the beginning?
Really good, because it helped me, I think it helped me keep on track. And obviously the session that I had with you was still bringing up new things, and I needed to make that connection. So just being able to talk to you and saying, oh, I've just thought of something else, and I never thought that this was connected before, and you helped sort of compartmentalize that for me. And one of the things that I did notice, like I said before, you know, I keep my personal and professional life very private. It's when people who didn't know my background and didn't know my history said, oh, there's something different about you. You know, something's changed. Have you got your hair different? Have you had a facial? So it was the physical difference that they could see in me, as well as the emotional. So that was like, wow, really? Okay. Very profound.
It was amazing to watch you kind of break out of that grief, of that shell, and really look around you and notice how much you really had going on for you, and appreciate, like, your husband, your son, because I think before that you had it, but you hadn't fully let that in. It was somehow feeling you and acknowledging your second husband and his love and everything. It allowed you to fully kind of embrace the future you are having and move forward. That's what I felt. Tell me something. Do you agree?
No, absolutely. Because before it was a case of I was playing the role of what was expected of me, but now I was doing it full-hearted and wholeheartedly, if that makes sense. And one of the things that I was able to do, and I don't know if any of your listeners will understand this, 9 years of grief, of living with a 10-ton truck on your shoulders and having to pretend that it wasn't there, was very hard. But after the treatment, I think it was 9 months after the treatment with you, I was able, it came to the 10-year anniversary of my husband's death, and I was able to have a celebration program, memorial program at the house for him. And you know, it was the first time that I was able to talk about him and his life and what he brought to everybody without crying.
Yeah. No, you've come a very long way.
Yeah. So I'll always miss him. It'll always be a big loss. But now they're tears that I'm so glad I had him for whatever period I had him. So.
And that's just it with grief, because it's so permanent. You know that every single day. And as time goes forward, it actually can feel more difficult, because you realize that, hang on, it's not just temporary, this is for life. And just having to accept that, and then as you're moving forward and life is happening, but that grief, if it's not expressed and not let out, it just hangs on. And to be able to then speak to everybody about it. And look at you today, coming on here and speaking so candidly and so openly. So many people are being very encouraged. You're getting amazing comments. If I could read them to you, but when you get a chance, go back and see the comments later on if they still hang on. But a lot of people are saying that they are really, really, they're basically appreciating how brave you are. So in terms of so that was then, so that happened. You did the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
So it's been about 2 years now since we last. I just want to mention one thing, by the way, with you, because you were my very first client, and I was also learning, and I was in my beginner circle, whereas now I've done nearly over 100 sessions. But at that time, you were my very first person. So you only got the one session from me. So it was only one session, which
Just
is
one.
about 2.5, 3 hours long. And then you had my weekly coaching.
Yeah.
But sometimes if there's still issues pending nowadays, like we recommend 2 to 3 sessions, because it's just like you said, you deal with one thing and then something else comes up and then something else comes up. So that's just something I wanted to put out there. But this result that we had, this is why it blew me away. I just had the one session with you and you were able to really shift so many things and get so much strength to move forward.
Yeah.
How are you now today after 2 years? Tell us, so you weren't working then and you were not able to work initially. So
No.
tell us a bit about your work, about your family, how your son is, just very briefly on where you are at today.
Yeah, well, I'm back at work now, full-time work. I've managed to be able to be at home with my son and raise him until the age of 7, being a full-time mom. And I think it's turning that negative into a positive, where I
Yeah.
waited 25 years to have a child. I then got the opportunity to spend that time with him, which I probably wouldn't have done had I been working. I probably wouldn't have been able to conceive him with the high stressful role that I was doing. So it's turning that around, but being able to live a full life now and a complete life now, where I don't have to act a certain way because society expects me to behave that way. I'm there because that's how I now feel. I feel like, I was married to this amazing man and life happens and I lost him, but I would never regret that ever. And now when I think about him or talk about him, it brings happiness because I had that time. And I'm building on that happiness now and building on the strength and the lessons that I learned during that period as well, which I never thought that I'd be able to do, never mind.
Another thing I guess some people might be curious about is how have you dealt with that loss? How have you explained it to your son? And your husband was already a friend with him, but how does that relate, like your current situation, embrace his passing?
Okay, so
How have they,
yeah,
how do you deal with that?
that's a very good question actually. So as my son was growing up, obviously he used to see pictures of my late husband around the house and used to ask who he was, and I'd say he was my guardian angel. And so he loved that. He loved that concept that there's somebody watching over us as a family, watching over mummy. And but now as he's getting older, especially since the 10-year anniversary, I was able to tell him a little bit about mummy was married before she met papa, and this is her husband, and I had an accident. And then I can explain all the scars on my body, the physical scars, and how they had to rebuild my arm and parts of my body. And he understands that. And now when we pass the accident point, it's a case of, oh, you okay, mummy? Yeah, I'm fine. And, that's a lovely tree that's growing there now. And, we still go to the riverside on important anniversaries and put flowers in the water. And it's a family thing and it's a celebration of his life rather than, oh, it's 2 years now, it's 3 years on now, and just focusing on how I should be behaving, how I should be seeing, but living a complete and open life now and being able to talk about it openly as well and accepting what's happened.
Because I think grief is such a subject that it's almost taboo. People don't know how to talk about it. People don't know what to say. People don't know even if they should say something or not, and they might hurt you. At the same time, they don't want to, they're not, people who are grieving don't talk about it because they feel like there's a should that you should have be normal. So there's a lot of grief is something that I think personally, this is why I do the work I do. We really need to norm. It's something that's going to happen. If as humans, all of us are going to unfortunately experience this process because we lose people we love.
Yeah.
People don't talk about it, and it's not just grief. I'm going to come on to even just in, especially like in certain communities, our community, the Asian community, people don't talk about mental health. They have started. There's more awareness now, but there's still very much a let's not mention it, brush it under the
A
carpet, or
taboo.
just get on with it kind of attitude. What would you advise to people who are maybe feeling that way or feeling shame or guilt or there's a stigma? What advice would you give to somebody? Because you've had therapy, you've had
Yeah.
therapy. How would you kind of, what would you say to
I'd,
them?
I'd say you need to speak out, you need to get help, because I experienced all those things. I experienced the stigma of not only losing my husband, but being a widow and everything that's seen as part of that. You know, not being able to, being told not to come to wedding ceremonies because I was seen as bad luck. That's culturally entrenched in our communities, and more than you would think. Not being invited to family functions because it might make people feel uncomfortable. So it's not just the individual, but it's their families and their friends around them that need that support to be able to talk about the grief and the loss that they've had as well. So that sometimes they're too busy looking after the immediate person who's suffering that grief, in my case, myself. But what you're so entrenched in your own grief that you forget what the people around you are going through. They're trying to look after you, but they've lost a son, a brother, a
Yes,
child, and they're trying to cope with what society puts on them as well. And I really hope that your work and the things that you do help anybody who's grieving to be able to open up and talk about it and
thank
be able to
that's what
heal.
I hope to do. Yeah. In terms of, so I'm going to ask you a question. Had you not had that session with me and the way you were going, what do you think would have happened? I know it's a big, wide question, but what do you think? The way you were going, where was your journey taking you at that time, had you not had that intervention?
Well, it was bad enough that I felt that I was not worthy of my husband, not worthy of my child, because I wasn't able to be fully with them.
Yeah, I
So
remember
it
that.
got to a point where I felt they would be better off without me, and
And this is what, yeah,
that's very hard
I
for my
don't,
friends and
yeah,
family to hear. But when you're in
it is.
grief, that's you have that tunnel vision and you can't think of anything, or you can't even take anything else in.
And when you said those words to me all 2 years, when we met and you said that, and I knew that something needs to be done, and you spoke up. Had you not spoken up, no one would have known. And I think this is the point that I want to really drill to anyone who is watching, that when you are going through any kind of, so I know I specialize in grief and things like depression and anxiety that come up with it, but I RTT is for many issues. So regardless of what issues you're having, I mean, when it's physical, we find it easier to go see a doctor and seek help, but especially for mental well-being, we somehow hesitate. We feel people will judge us. We feel a bit of shame, maybe, a feel that we've let somebody down, so we may feel guilty. Some of us, we don't want to burden somebody else by speaking with them. But this point is just to hone in on the fact that, you never know. If you speak up, only then can somebody know what's going on, and only then can you actually seek the help or get the help. And the first step is to just speak up and say, I need help. There is no shame in that. In fact, it's a very brave thing. And this, I always put this in all my content and everything, that the fact that you're speaking up, doesn't matter who you go to for help, but when you're able to say, I need help, that step in itself is such a brave step. And it's not selfish, it is full of self-care. So I encourage anyone who's watching, please reach out and get help when you do need to. So any final things, Manjit, before we cut off? Thank you so much for joining me, but you want to say anything before we end
I just want
today?
to say, I just want to say thank you, because without your help and work, I wouldn't be here with my son and husband today. So thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to do that, given that I was studying and practicing, and you put your trust in me. And the therapy itself is so amazing that, here we are today chatting about it. So thank you so much again for allowing me to come full circle in my journey with you.
These are
And
happy tears now, by the way.
that's a happy, yeah. Honestly, like I'm so
Really.
proud of you, and I'm so proud of your journey, and I'm so proud of where you are today. When I see you flourish, and when I see you with your son, and now that you're working, and you're not just working, you've got a good job, it really truly makes me feel so happy. And I'm so blessed to be able to do this. So I really, really thank you for speaking out and speaking so bravely. So honestly, God bless, you know. Um, I will be doing these Q&As more. So for everyone who is watching, I will be doing weekly Q&As, and I will be speaking to different people whenever I have a chance, whoever is able to come on. As you can see, sometimes it's very hard to speak about what you've gone through, but I will be making more effort to have more people on here sharing their experiences, not just with RTT, but with their life journey. I think it's important that we have a platform where people can come up and just share their story, but you will also get a chance to learn more about me and about Rapid Transformational Therapy as we go on. So I hope you continue. For whoever stayed with us all this time, thank you for joining. Thank you so much, Manjit, for joining. I
Thank you
love
for
you so
having
much.
me. Thank you for everything. Thank you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye. Thank you, everybody.